Darius Mosley was 41 years old, and for 13 years he had been the man people overlooked. He wore Dockers from a clearance rack. He drove a Honda Civic with one hubcap missing. At the accounting firm where his wife Camille worked, the partners knew him as the quiet husband in the background at the holiday party. The one who didn't drink, didn't network, didn't perform. What none of them knew was that the Civic paid for itself in cash every 4 years, and the overlooking was exactly how he had built it. He came home on a Thursday evening in October, still wearing the wool suit he'd bought in 2015. The left shoulder had a small stain from a job site visit. Camille was in the kitchen with a man he'd never seen before, tall, polished Italian leather shoes with no scuff marks. The man was laughing at something on his phone. When he saw Darius, something changed in his face. Not fear, but a kind of dismissal. He looked at the suit and actually smiled. Camille's hand was on the man's arm. Darius set his briefcase down on the marble counter. He had installed that marble himself 8 months ago, on a weekend when Camille said she was at a conference. She was, in fact, on the 3rd floor of the Hilton downtown, with the man now standing in his kitchen. The man extended his hand. His name was Preston Caldwell. "You must be the husband," he said. "Camille told me you work in logistics," he said it the way someone says cafeteria instead of restaurant. Darius shook his hand and felt the softness of fingers that had never gripped anything heavier than a fountain pen. "That suit," Preston said, actually pointing, "is that vintage? Or just vintage?" Camille laughed like it was charming, like it wasn't a knife. Over the following 3 weeks, Darius watched her build her exit the way a termite builds through a house, methodically, invisibly, with purpose. She asked for access to his accounts, which he gave her. She asked for the passwords to his emails, which he also gave her. She had him sign documents she said were for their new home equity line of credit. He signed them. She was audacious in a way that only worked when the other person was not paying attention. But Darius was always paying attention. He had 2 lives, and she knew nothing about the second one. The morning after Preston laughed at his suit, Darius walked into his office on the 18th floor of the Carver Building in downtown Charlotte. The nameplate on the door said, D. Mosley, Managing Principal. The window showed the city in all directions. His assistant, a woman named Patricia, who had worked with him for 8 years, brought him coffee and a folder. In the folder was documentation of every transfer Camille had made in the past 42 days. $234,000, moved in increments small enough not to trigger reporting requirements. Into an account opened in both their names, but funded entirely with money she'd convinced him to invest with a broker she'd selected. The broker was Preston Caldwell's father. "How long?" Darius asked Patricia. "Since July," she said. "I flagged it when you asked me to watch the secondary accounts. I've been compiling since then." Darius nodded. He opened his personal laptop and created a new folder. He named it simply, The Record. Into it he placed every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence. He did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. This was a project like any other project. It had phases. It had dependencies. It had a completion date. He called his uncle, Robert Mosley, a retired federal prosecutor who lived in Greensboro. Robert had represented him once, a long time ago, when a situation had required legal intervention of a permanent kind. Robert understood the shape of things. "I need a family law specialist," Darius said. "The best one in the state. And I need someone who knows financial forensics." "How bad?" Robert asked. "Worse than you're thinking," Darius said. By the following Tuesday, he was sitting across from Brenda Cartwright in her office on Tryon Street. Brenda was 62 years old, had divorced 2 Fortune 500 CEOs, and did not flinch at anything. Darius laid out the documents in order. The fraudulent transfers, the forged signature on the home equity line, the discovery of a second phone account in her name, the photographs from a security camera in the Hilton parking garage, the financial profile of Preston Caldwell, which showed a man living entirely on his father's money, carrying $200,000 in personal debt, and currently the subject of a SEC investigation into his firm's pension fund handling. "How long have you known?" Brenda asked. 23 days, Darius said. "What do you want to happen?" "I want her to understand what she stole from," Darius said, "and I want it to be legal, documented, and irreversible." Brenda smiled like she'd just been handed a gift. "That," she said, "I can do." For 2 weeks, Brenda and her team moved like surgeons. They froze the accounts. They filed a civil suit for restitution. They contacted the State Bar Association with documentation of the forged signature. They handed the security footage to the local police, who opened an investigation into wire fraud. They contacted the SEC investigator already looking at Preston's firm and handed him the evidence of Preston's involvement in moving stolen funds through his father's investment company. They filed a motion to suspend Camille's accounting license pending investigation. The beautiful part was that none of it required his presence. The documents did the work. The law did the work. The evidence, gathered by other people, destroyed everything she had built. At home, Darius continued to act as if nothing had changed. He ate her dinners. He slept in their bed. He complimented her on small things. He was the same quiet man she had married 13 years ago, the one she thought was soft enough to rob. On a Wednesday afternoon, Brenda called. "They're ready," she said. "I've asked them to meet at the law offices. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you be there?" Darius said he could. The conference room at Cartwright and Associates occupied the entire western side of the 31st floor. The windows showed the Catawba River and the land beyond it for 40 miles. Camille arrived expecting to sign some paperwork with her lawyer, a public defender she'd hired from an online directory. She was shocked to find not just her lawyer, but Darius sitting at the head of the table. And next to him, Patricia from his office, and beside Patricia, his Uncle Robert, who simply shook his head at her with profound disappointment. And at the far end, looking like he wanted to disappear into the wood paneling, Preston Caldwell. Brenda did not greet anyone. She simply opened a binder and began laying out documents. Bank records, wire transfers, forged signatures that had been digitally analyzed, the home equity line that had never actually existed, the photographs from the Hilton, the security deposit box that had been opened in her name without authorization, the second phone records, the text messages where she had described her plan to Preston's father with a kind of casual cruelty only the truly shameless possess. "Your accounting license is suspended as of this morning," Brenda said. "The state bar will conduct a hearing in 60 days. Based on the evidence here, you will not practice in North Carolina again." She turned the pages. "The wire fraud charges will be filed with federal prosecutors this week. You are the subject of a criminal investigation. Your bail hearing will be scheduled by the court." Another page. "Mr. Caldwell Sr. is currently being interviewed by the SEC regarding pension fund mismanagement and the movement of fraudulent assets through his company. That investigation is separate from this one, but the documentation we've provided makes clear his son's involvement." Preston made a small noise. His lawyer, who had not been told what was actually happening, was writing notes with the intensity of someone who had just realized his entire afternoon had been rearranged. Darius stood. He looked at his wife. You came into our marriage as an accountant. You understood the power of the paper trail. You just didn't understand that I kept better records than you did." He walked to the window. The river was brown with recent rain. The October light made everything sharp. "I own 63% of one of the largest logistics companies on the East Coast," he said without looking at her. "I did not inherit this. I built it. For the past 13 years, while you were planning how to leave, I was documenting how to protect myself. I asked you for passwords not because I was naive. I asked you for passwords because I wanted to see how far you would go. You exceeded every expectation." He turned back to the table. "Patricia, show the other document." Patricia opened a leather folder. Inside was a document stamped by the North Carolina Superior Court. It was a property deed. The house with the marble counter he'd installed himself, the renovated kitchen, the master suite, was in his name alone. It had been in his name alone since 2016, before she'd ever asked him to marry her. "You thought you were stealing from me," Darius said. "I own my company. I own my house. Every account you accessed was meant to be accessed. Every signature I gave you was deliberate. I have spent 13 years protecting what is mine. That includes my peace." Camille stood. She was crying now, but it was the kind of crying that required an audience, and there was no audience for it anymore. Everyone in the room could see the performance, and nobody cared. "This is not about money," she said. "This is not about Preston." "No," Robert said quietly. "This is about the fact that you underestimated a man who gave you every advantage and received only betrayal in return." Camille looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer was looking at his phone, apparently checking the Bar Association website to see if his own license was somehow in jeopardy. Darius gathered his briefcase. He did not look back at his wife. He did not look at Preston Caldwell or his father or the various lawyers now frantically calculating the scope of the disasters spreading out before them. He simply nodded at Patricia and walked out. The elevator ride down was quiet. The lobby was quiet. The parking garage was quiet. He drove the Civic home with the same care he gave to everything. 14 months had passed when the federal sentencing hearing took place. Camille was sentenced to 42 months in federal prison for wire fraud and identity fraud. Preston Caldwell received 18 months for conspiracy. His father, surprisingly, avoided criminal charges but had to surrender 70% of his business to the SEC as restitution for the pension fund irregularities. The firm that Preston's family had owned for 37 years was dissolved. Darius learned about this from a text message Patricia sent him. He read it while sitting on the deck of his new house in the Catawba Hills, 30 miles north of Charlotte. He had designed the house himself and built most of it himself. The deck wrapped around the back, and from it, he could see 15 acres of his own land. He had planted 200 native trees on that land. They were just beginning to establish themselves. A woman named Diana was sitting beside him. She was a pediatric surgeon who had asked good questions the first time they met, and had not asked many since. She did not perform for him. She did not assume. She was simply present in the way that real people are. They had met at a symposium where Darius was speaking about supply chain optimization. She had asked a brilliant question about scalability in rural healthcare distribution. He had asked if she wanted dinner to continue the conversation. She had said yes. They sat quietly, watching the light change across the valley. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes," Darius said. "There's a situation that will not bother me anymore. It's resolved." "Good," she said. And she did not ask for details. She did not need them. That evening, Darius stood in his workshop. The walls were organized with the kind of precision that only a maker understands. tools in their places. Wood organized by grain and drying time. A project in process. A credenza made from reclaimed chestnut, built for Diana's clinic, where she could store sensitive files and difficult memories. He had promised it would be beautiful and functional. He kept his promises. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.